Everyone, I hope you're doing all right. Can we just have a quick sound check? Can everyone hear me okay? Amazing, good stuff. I thought I'd be getting some big responses off that. That's great. Okay, so thank you for joining me and Duncan here today. As you can see from the chat, which it looks like I've now broken, there's a lot of us here, and we're all here for the same reason. We're here for the drone regulations. So if any of you lose signal or connection issues, don't worry, it's going to be recorded so you can go back through it. Or if you read through it once and you want to go through it again, that's absolutely fine as well. So yeah, this is drone regulations explained. We got a lot of interest from our last video, so we thought we'll go through it again. We've got some more slides this time so we can really get in and make some good notes on it. Yeah, bigger and better than last time. So yeah, thank you for joining us. Yeah, to introduce ourselves. So I'm Jamie Corden. I've been with Copters now for 2 years. I'm part of the business development side and one of the UAV strategists here. So helping people get into this really exciting new industry. And then I'm here with Duncan. Duncan, do you want to introduce yourself, mate?
Morning, everyone. Thanks for all joining us today. And yeah, as Jamie said, my name's Duncan. I work in the training department. So there are a couple of us in that department responsible for mainly for training, for delivering these 2 courses, the A2 CofC and the GVC qualification. But we also have obviously our own internal permissions in Copters when we're providing demonstrations of kit and handovers. So we also manage the permissions for that as well.
Spot on. Awesome. Well, guys, we've got a lot to get through today. So just some quick ground rules. If you have any questions, please use the question tab. And also, whilst we're on that, there's a lot of people on today. So if you have a question that's already been asked, try and refrain, or maybe just add it to that question, and we can go into it a bit more detail. And that'd be absolutely amazing. So yeah, if you want to catch our attention, you can use the chat if you want. Or if we don't get to your question at the end, we'll try and get in touch with you afterwards. As you can imagine, there's a hell of a lot of people. We've already got a huge amount of questions so far. So we're going to try and go into a lot of detail through the slideshow. So hopefully that will give everyone a really nice idea moving forward. And we'll just go from there. So to crack on then, in terms of the regulations, a lot of what we're getting over the phone is we're not really sure what's going on. What did it actually mean for me getting into the industry? For anyone who hasn't trained in the past, for people who have trained in the past, it's a lot of the case of where does that leave me? What do I have to do now? How do I get that into my operations manual? These sorts of questions are cropping up a lot. Do I have to sit the course again? And how much of the course do I need to do, etc., etc.? How much does it cost? It's the big question at the end of the day. So yeah, there's lots of different areas we can look at. So yeah, this will clear up a lot of that for you today. All the new courses, all of your options, and whereabouts you, most importantly, sit in all this. So to crack on, a quick overview. So we're going to be touching base on all different areas, all the different courses. We'll start with Duncan working through the slides, and then we'll just take it from there, guys. The Q&A will be at the end. Like I say, if you want to catch our attention, use the chat. We've got a couple of the team in that are going to help us as well. But yeah, any questions, try and use the questions tab, which is below us, below where me and Duncan are. But yeah, Duncan, do you want to fire away, mate?
That is familiar with the regulations last year, and I suppose last year, certainly over the last sort of 5 years previously, there used to be a really big distinction between hobbyist flying and commercial flying. And up until the winter period, we're offering the permission for commercial operations kind of course. And that's what you had to do to operate commercially if you wanted to fly your aircraft. Predominantly if you wanted to fly your aircraft closer within a congested area, and for some, perhaps even closer to uninvolved people. Now, effectively over the winter period, so over the new year, there's been a massive shift now in the regulations. The UK has adopted the EU Regs, which changes the focus on how restricted you are based on the safety of the flight. And ultimately, the way that they've kind of determined how safe something is predominantly based on the aircraft weight. And I mean, it makes sense that the lighter aircraft are going to pose less risk to individuals opposed to flying a heavier aircraft. Therefore, you may need to do less training on a lighter aircraft to get the same permissions. So before we dive into the different categories and the different operating areas, it's important to understand that the commercial and hobbyist distinction is completely different. So that, now there's no distinction between hobbyist or commercial flying. It doesn't matter. Now, it does matter for those who wish to fly smaller aircraft that may need to obtain some of these additional permissions, such as the GVC, especially if you're part of a larger organization, but we'll dive into that a bit later on. So just to start then with this quick overview, there are 3 categories as to which you can operate your aircraft in. And we'll start with the one where the majority of us will begin in. It's the open category. And over the next couple of slides, we'll be diving into this one specifically in a bit more detail. The open category is geared more towards hobbyists, some commercial users. It's related to much lighter aircraft, out-of-the-box aircraft, an aircraft that are below 25 kilograms of maximum takeoff mass as well. For those that don't fit into the open category, and this is more so talking about aircraft that are above 4 kilograms, so anything like your matrice aircraft, etc., etc., the more industrial aircraft will likely fall into the specific category. And the specific category is where you need to obtain the operational authorization by doing the GVC course with us. And then they also have the certified category, and that's not something we'll dive into at all on this webinar. It's more so relating to aircraft that are, over 150 kilograms in weight, talking about, drone deliveries, drone taxi services, all stuff that's going to be, implemented, a long time in the future. So don't concern yourselves too much with the certified category. So the open category then, it's further divided into multiple subcategories. You've got the A1, which is flying over people, A2, fly close to people, and A3, flying far from people. And depending on the drone which you have firstly, that determines which subcategory you fit into. And then some of them have additional qualification requirements. So pretty much all of them will have the DMARES, so the flyer ID and the operator ID. And then some of them might need you to do the A2 CofC qualification as well to fit yourselves into that. And if you wouldn't mind just doing the next slide, Jamie. Thanks. So yeah, these classes then, C0 to C4, it's a CE rating. They're being introduced based on weight and a couple of other factors. It's mainly the weight, but there are other things such as maximum speed and things like that. There aren't any aircraft in production at the moment that currently are CE rated. So all the aircraft which we are flying at the moment fall into the different transitional categories. So the transitional period runs from December the 31st, 2020 to December the 31st, 2022, allowing all these aircraft without any class markings to continue to be flown in the open category. Realistically, we're envisaging that the majority of manufacturers will start producing these CE rated aircraft this year. But what it does mean is that if you have purchased an aircraft, or if you are, if you are looking to buy one soon, it's not going to cause you much of a problem. I wouldn't worry about that at all. And yeah, in most cases, the UK drone registration is required. So, before you step foot outside and fly your aircraft as a hobbyist, in your back garden, if you have the space, you've got to make sure that you're doing the flyer ID and also getting the operator ID and affixing it onto your aircraft as well. So to operate A2 subcategory or the A1 subcategory with these transitional aircraft, an A2 certificate of competency is needed. And the A2 CofC is an online course, and it's something which at the moment is being delivered remotely. And it's realistically, it'll probably take you, depending on your experience, at least 1 to maybe a couple of days to do online. There's a self-monitored practical flight training element as well. There are virtual classrooms, there are virtual drop-in sessions, and then the actual examinations, the theory exams, are remote. Now, in terms of the actual aircraft themselves, we'll dive into the different CE ratings and the different weights later on. But effectively, the big, I suppose, weight categories you need to be aware of is 250 grams if your aircraft's below that, so something like the Mavic Mini. below 500 grams, and then below 2 kilograms as well. These three different subcategories, or not subcategories, classes rather, are going to determine how close you can fly your aircraft. So we'll be covering that in the next couple of slides. So if your aircraft, like I was saying before, 2 kilograms, you get certain permissions, but if it's over 4 kilograms, realistically, you want to be putting yourself into the next one, the specific category. And in order to do that, you need to obtain a GVC, a General Visual Line of Sight certificate, and that will allow you to apply for an operational authorization. Now, this is pretty much the same as what the PFCO is. It gives you the same operating limitations with regards to your distances. The main benefit is that you can obviously fly much heavier aircraft that cannot be done in the open category without certain limitations. If you're somebody who's on the webinar that currently has a PFCO, you can continue to renew it. Effectively, when you next renew, you'll need to make sure that you add a couple of changes onto it, and you'll need to make sure that you've got all the new regulations up to date. But effectively, your PFCO will turn into an operational authorization, so to speak, when you do that renewal. And you can continue to renew that up until the 31st of December 2023. After that point, you'd need to start effectively from scratch with regards to the qualifications. You'd need to do that GVC course with us, which falls in line with the 5-year expiry of the qualification. So once you have the GVC, valid for 5 years, the qualification, you still need to apply for the permission from the CAA yearly, and then you'd have to come back to us and do some form of resit of the test just to check currency. And yeah, last point, like I was saying before, there's no distinction between leisure and commercial drone flights. It purely depends on the weight of the aircraft. So where can you fly? I suppose this kind of summarizes the last couple of slides that I've just been talking about. If we start with the open category, it's low risk. So we're talking about, ultimately we're talking about flights. We're talking about aircraft which are not heavy. They're not going to, I suppose, pose much of a danger to individuals. There's no CAA authorization required for this. So when you complete the A2 CofC, you will receive a certificate from us. And that certificate's all you need. That's the authorization. So ourselves, as the RAE, we issue you the authorization directly. So the limitations are based on the aircraft's CE rating, or for the moment, it's based on the actual weight. And with regards to distances, in the past, so if you're somebody who is familiar with the regulations last year, or you currently hold a PFCO, quite often the distances from uninvolved people can be referred to as a cylinder, as a bubble rather. However, in the open category, it's a cylinder. So we're talking about horizontal separation. So for example, when you're operating in the A3 subcategory, so for anyone flying effectively anything between 500 grams and 2 kilograms, you'd fall into the A3 subcategory. And effectively, you'd need to make sure that you are not closer than 50 meters horizontally from uninvolved persons. So you can't overfly people. If you wish to overfly, you need to either get an aircraft that's a lot lighter, such as something under 250 grams, and operate in the open category, or you then need to look at going into the specific category. The specific category is then the operational authorization. So you need to undertake the GVC to do this. So there's a bit more training involved, but the reward in that is that you get closer permissions with larger aircraft, so you can fly within 50 meters of uninvolved people, or 30 meters for takeoff and landing, for anything up to 25 kilograms. And you can also overfly people with these heavier aircraft. But as a result of that, there's a bit more training needed to prove to the CAA that you understand and that you have that level of competency. And not only do you have to do the test, you also need to produce an operations manual, which we give you complete guidance over. And we have online workshops at the moment, and we have plenty of templates to help you ensure that you can actually get this done. And yeah, like I was mentioning before, the certified category, we won't dive into that too much. It's talking about transport of people, transport of goods, that sort of thing. So the PFCO, sorry, I just missed a bit of the previous slide, Jeremy. Thanks. So the PFCO will continue to be valid, like I was saying before. If you're somebody on the webinar that's currently got a PFCO, like I mentioned, just make sure it doesn't run out. You can renew it, but if it expires, you wouldn't be able to start that initial application again. So you can effectively renew your PFCO or renew your operational authorization up until 90 days before the expiry. And then when you renew it, the next expiry date will be based on the previous expiry date. So you may as well do it 90 days prior to the expiry, get it in, and you get a bit more time with the permission for, I suppose, the same price. And yeah, like I said, you can renew that for a number of years. Anyone that, I suppose, undertook the PFCO training with us after September 2019 will get the A2 CofC training free of charge. And this is completely live at the moment. We're just in the process of onboarding the majority of people over to it. Obviously, there are multiple classes in the open category range from C0 to C4. We were talking about that earlier. And yeah, DMARAs. So, you know, with I suppose anyone that owns an aircraft, or even if you don't own an aircraft at the moment, it's definitely worth getting your flyer ID and your operator ID now, because you will need it at some point.
Do that, just exactly what that is, that abbreviation. I've had quite a few people asking me on that one.
No, absolutely. So effectively, with regards to the drone registration, so from the start, you need to have a flyer ID and an operator ID, and there is a bit of a difference between them. So each remote pilot needs to have a flyer ID, and kind of think of it almost as in kind of like your driving license. So, you know, it's in, you know, by all means, it's not a license at all. Essentially the flyer ID is free. You can obtain it from the CAA website. I believe it's either a 30 or a 40 question exam now, multiple choice. You need to get 75% to pass. And then once you pass, you get your little flyer ID, and that's kind of it's an identification assigned to yourself, and it permits you to be a remote pilot to fly an aircraft. But you also need to obtain an operator ID if you're responsible for the drone. So for those who are self-employed or even just as a hobbyist, you will need an operator ID because you would own the aircraft. The operator ID, you know, there's no cost associated. Well, there is the £9 cost associated with it, but there's no test or anything like that. It's just registration, and then that little operator ID needs to be affixed onto your aircraft. But yeah, ultimately, operator ID is for whoever's responsible for the aircraft. So if it's for a company, the company has the operator ID. So I suppose, you know, if we think about copters as operator ID, they have an operator ID registered, and all the company aircraft have the operator ID on them. And then everybody flying, you know, with copters aircraft will have their own flyer ID, and that's the way it has to be. You know, even though the A2 CofC and the GVC courses go into, you know, quite a lot of expansive detail on regulations, right at the start of both courses, it's really basic, and it will guide you through how to do that. You'll get all the links on the course as to how to register your aircraft, that sort of thing. Whilst it's not strictly speaking the syllabus as to how to specifically go through the operator ID process, it's something which, you know, we do quite a lot with students. We'll sort of, you know, quite a lot of people will ask about it. You know, we'll make sure that everyone knows where to go and make sure they can all get the qualification before they even start training with us.
Spot on. Yeah, that's it, guys. Like, the reason we've got this on today is to answer all your questions. In terms of moving forward, if you do have them, or you're going through the course, or you're at one of these stages, just reach out to us. We're doing this for a reason, and it is to help you. So whether, depending on what stage you're at, just get in touch. It really doesn't matter. We're here to help at the end of the day. But yeah, from the CAA's point of view, there's so many more steps in there. Again, it's going to help you get through and find exactly what's going to be best for you as well. So it is confusing at the start, but once you start to digest it, it really will help, and it'll sink in a lot better for everyone as well. Right, and moving on then to the open category then, Duncan. A few slides on this one. Fire away, mate.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose that first paragraph talking about pilots flying by the rules of the open category will tend to be hobbyists or recreational flyers. Whilst that is true, that is referring to the majority of people. There are still a lot of commercial operators, and I suppose ourselves included, that will be flying in the open category because it permits you to fly closer to people without needing to undertake a huge amount of qualifications, as long as the aircraft is quite light. So there are a number of basic requirements that all open category pilots have to adhere to. So the maximum takeoff mass of the aircraft must be less than 25 kilos. And realistically, for the majority of commercially available off-the-shelf aircraft, you won't have to worry about that too much. We also need to keep the drone within VLOS, visual line of sight, and that's a buzzword which you'll find all throughout our training. Visual line of sight, talking about direct, unaided line of sight with the aircraft. So effectively, you need to be able to see it at all times. And this is normally accepted out to about 500 meters maximum, but it depends on the aircraft that you're flying. So if you have a DJI Mavic Mini, realistically, you wouldn't be able to fly at 500 meters because you'd lose sight of it visually before you got to that point. It's making sure that you are keeping an eye on the aircraft, but I suppose more importantly, keeping an eye on the airspace around you as well, having good perception as to what else is going on. We also can't fly higher than 400 feet from the Earth's surface. Now, this is referring to, I suppose, open areas. There are a couple of ways in which, if you did need to, you can actually fly above 400 feet. If, for example, an obstacle, such as, let's say, a skyscraper, is above 400 feet, as long as your set distances from it, such as 15 meters across and no more than 50 feet above it, then you're absolutely fine to exceed that 400 feet. But again, you need to make sure that you have visual line of sight with your aircraft. So if you need to fly outside one of these conditions, you need to seek permission to fly in the specific category. So for those that need to fly further than 500 meters, need to fly outside of visual line of sight, which is usually referring to flying, a couple of kilometers away. If you need to do this, then you need to undertake additional qualifications and you need to operate in that specific category. And the first step for that is to undertake the GVC qualification. And then there are various bolt-on modules soon to be available. And the first one is the Beyond Visual Line of Sight bolt-on module 1, which we'll shortly be offering later on this year. And it will allow people to fly outside of that line of sight using additional spotters to guide them. Awesome. That's all for this slide. Great. So we dive into a bit more detail over the next couple of slides about these different subcategories, and I kind of glanced over them before, but in the next couple of slides we'll be talking about the next aircraft and I suppose trying to relate them to actual aircraft that are available now. So I suppose we'll start with the A1. So DJI Mavic Mini, DJI Mini 2, as long as the aircraft's flying weight is below 250 grams, then the aircraft can operate in this A1 transitional class. Now, just bear in mind that this is flying weight. So realistically, if you were to attach prop guards or attach other attachments to a Mavic Mini, it's likely that that's going to be more than a gram. It will bring you over that 250 gram mark, and it will then put you into a different class, I suppose. So, with regards to flying over people, we are referring to these aircraft that are C0, so they are below 250 grams. Now, throughout the whole webinar, I suppose at the moment, we've been talking about distances from people, uninvolved persons, but there are other things to be aware of, and we dive into a lot more detail on our courses about this. But there are certain airspace restrictions, restricted areas, danger areas, flight restriction zones where it's possible to get permission to fly, but you just need to make sure that you go through the appropriate bodies to obtain that. And it's not something which usually takes a lot of time. Usually it's either going to be a phone call, an email, or in most cases just an online form. It's not going to cost you anything. You just need to make sure that you contact the appropriate people first to get permission before you fly. And yeah, obviously we can fly congested areas as well within this subcategory. So C0 drones, the sub 250 gram drones, effectively there's no horizontal or vertical, I suppose, limitation as to how far you can fly from people. You still need to make sure it's safe, and there are still various data protection laws, GDPR, privacy laws to be aware of as well as trespass. You need to make sure that you have landowners' permission, that you're not trespassing for where you take off. But effectively, the main stipulation is that you cannot fly over assemblies of people. And this is talking about uninvolved people. So if the people are involved, if they're taking part in the drone flight, then it's absolutely fine to overfly them, as long as they're briefed correctly as to, I suppose, what could go wrong and what's going to happen. And then anything a bit heavier, between that 250 gram and 500 gram mark, we go into the C1, if there were to be any in the future, but mainly the A1 transitional drones, such as the DJI Mavic Air and the Spark. So with these aircraft, you can't overfly uninvolved persons, but there's no specific horizontal separation distance from uninvolved people. So strictly speaking, you could fly as close as you deem safe to, but this year the CAA introduced what they're calling the one-to-one rule. Now, it's a rule of thumb. It's not strictly by law. But what they say is, for example, if you want to fly at a height of, let's say, 20 feet, then you should be at least 20 feet away from that individual. If you want to be flying at a height of 5 feet, you need to be at least 5 feet away from them. And what that's doing, that's making sure that the risks are reduced by, I suppose, keeping that distance from people. Obviously, the higher you are height-wise, the more velocity the aircraft's going to get if it was to drop out the sky, the more of a risk that could impose. So we'll jump into the A2 subcategory then. And the majority of, realistically, the majority of the aircraft that I think copters sell will, certainly to consumers, and certainly for the first aircraft for most people, their aircraft will probably fit into this category. So we'll start with the second paragraph, A2 transitional aircraft. So effectively anything up to 2 kilograms. So in our case, anything between that 500 gram mark and 2 kilos. So Mavic Pro, Zoom, Mavic Air, that sort of thing. DJI Phantoms, all of them, they'll fit into this class. So we can fly up to 50 meters horizontally from people. So we just need to make sure that obviously we are maintaining that distance from people. We've obviously got all the other airspace restrictions as well, but that that's the main stipulation we have. In order to fly in this subcategory, we need to make sure that we undertake the A2 CofC. So I suppose for pretty much all of the operations in the open category, you need to have that ticket, that certification with you to make sure that you can fly in it. So yeah, obviously no flights in restricted airspace without permission. In the A2, we can fly in congested areas, so residential, commercial, industrial, and recreational areas, we can fly within them, and that's absolutely fine to do. For the C2 aircraft, and again, with regards to these C aircraft, we're talking about C0 and C1 in the previous slide. These aren't currently in production, but when they are available, we can start flying no closer than 30 meters from people, or even as much as 5 meters if they're in a low speed mode, such as tripod mode. And that's something which is going to be an absolute game changer when these aircraft get certified. But for the moment, like I was saying before, anything up to 2 kilos, you can't fly closer than 50 meters horizontally from uninvolved people. And then we have the A3. So for anyone that's done their flyer ID, their operator ID, and that's the only qualifications they've undertaken, by default, you start operating in the A3 subcategory. So this is for, I suppose, whilst you are qualified by undertaking the flyer ID and the operator ID, you haven't undertaken any formal qualifications. So, by default, you fall into this. Or if you're flying a much larger aircraft, such as a DJI Matrice or something like that. Now with this one, the main restriction is the distance from congested areas. And I think that's going to be in the next slide. There we go. So yeah, the main restriction we have on this is we can't fly within 150 meters horizontally from congested areas. Obviously, we've got all the airspace restrictions as well. And like the A2 subcategory, we can't fly closer than 50 meters horizontally from uninvolved people. And we've got to make sure that we employ that one-to-one rule. So the A3 subcategory is really restrictive, certainly when we're talking about congested areas. Now, for some individuals, that might be absolutely fine. You know, if you're somewhere rural, you might be able to get away with 150 meters horizontally, but for the majority of users, that's way too restrictive. So what they need to do is, if the aircraft is, you know, I suppose below 2 kilograms, look at obtaining the A2 CofC first, and then obviously a GVC at a later date if you deem relevant. Or if you find something over 2 kilograms, you need to jump straight to that GVC qualification to get the authorization. And then what that does, that allows you to fly still, you know, 50 meters from uninvolved people, but that top paragraph referring to 150 meters from congested areas, that just gets deleted. You can fly inside a congested area, which is a huge win.
That I've been talking to in terms of customers, people in the industry already. So just drone service providers, guys that are, you can now take advantage of this. So they might have a Mavic Mini in their arsenal. They might have a Mavic 2 Pro as well as the Matrice. So yeah, it's ideal for everyone to want to get to that top standard. Yes, to have the best drone in the industry. Look, there's a lot of opportunities out there. It's very, very raw and it's still very new. We're still having to do a lot of commercial teaching, and these new courses are going to add to that as well. But there are opportunities and that's what Duncan's going into here. So study up. Again, there's a lot of people are asking if it's recorded. This session is recorded, so by all means, go through it a few times. There's a lot of information in here. We've done that on purpose, just so you know exactly what is going on in the industry. Some great questions coming up in the chat. Absolutely loads at the bottom. So try and get them in that questions tab. Like I say, if we don't get through them today, we'll try and circle back round either in the Q&A or we'll get in touch with you. But yeah, a really big point there that Duncan just brought up. The different courses can suit you in different ways. So having a fleet of drones and the relevant training for each one is really, really powerful moving forward. So yeah, something to think about. And just like I say, there's a few people that have taken advantage of this already and getting ahead of the curve essentially. So yeah, Duncan, do you want to carry on, fella?
Yeah, sure. So we'll just recap that, the transitional period, and we're talking about, I mean, I mentioned it before, you know, in the future going forward, aircraft will receive a class marking, C0 to C4, mainly based on the weight. That then determines which subcategory, A1, A2, A3 of the open category, which you can fly your aircraft in. However, for the meantime, we've obviously got this transitional period, and you've got, I suppose the different transitional aircraft based on the weight of it. So in short then, and again, it's worth noting that, you know, all of these items here, C0 to C4, you know, this is referring to CE markings which haven't been regulated yet. So please don't look at this and just, you know, I suppose, you know, think that, okay, because my aircraft's below 900 grams, it'll fit into that. It has to be actually CE marked. And yeah, so, you know, as we mentioned at the bottom, as no CE rated aircraft are currently available, will fall into the, I suppose, you know, the legacy class of the aircraft or the transitional class. And I appreciate the text is quite small in this, I've only just realized now. But the table shows which subcategories each aircraft would fall into. So I suppose if we direct ourselves to the top right, you can look at the A1 transitional aircraft. And we've got things like the Mavic Mini, Parrot and Affy Thermal. I suppose A1 transitional aircraft is talking about aircraft that's below 500 grams in flying weight. So with that, you can fly with, in this A1 subcategory, no intentional flight over uninvolved persons, but you still need to observe that one-to-one rule. And with regards to competency, we've obviously got the DMARES, the flyer ID, and the operator ID. We've also got the A2 CofC test as well. For the A2 aircraft, DJI Phantoms, Mavics, the Helios, a couple of the other Parrot aircraft as well. These fit into that A2 subcategory. So we can fly no closer than 50 meters horizontally from uninvolved persons, as long as the aircraft's below 2 kilograms in flying weight. And again, we need to do the exact same. So Damares and A2 CofC. And then you've got A3 transitional aircraft, so the Matrice, the Winktra, the Ace Core, that sort of thing. And I suppose all of these aircraft, you can fly as close as 50 meters to uninvolved persons, but the main stipulation here is that you cannot fly within 150 meters of a congested area. If you wish to do so, or if you wish to fly closer or overhead people with these aircraft, you need to be looking at undertaking the GVC qualification to then get further permissions from the CAA.
This is a really, really important graph. I'm sorry about the font of it. It is on our website, on some of our blog posts as well. But I think what will be really, really useful for you guys if we can send this out. So if you've signed up for this, what we'll do is we'll chase it up. We'll get you this and just have a hard copy. Have something on your phone. And it's a really good thing to refer to if you are looking to get a new drone, if you're looking to push on in the industry or move. Something to consider, but yeah, there's a lot of detail. Just apologies for the size of it, but yeah, essentially different drones, different weights. You're going to fall into these different new categories. Yeah. So yeah, do you want to carry on going on to the GVC and the comparison?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we're going to move past the A2 CofC course now and jump straight into a bit more detail on this GVC. And what this table is showing, it's showing a comparison between the course we offered last year and then the course that we offer this year. And as you'll see, the actual kind of framework to obtain the permission is the same. So for those that are on the webinar that have trained with us in the past and undertaken the CofSU qualification, you'll have done a theory test with us, you'll have drafted an operations manual, and then completed a practical flight assessment. You then apply for the PFCO, and then the next year when you renew, that will turn into an operational authorization. Now, the regulations have changed, mainly with regards to this course. There's a little bit of a change in the syllabus. It's a bit more comprehensive on the practical flight assessment, but the majority of the syllabus is pretty much the same. And the actual format is identical. Theory test, operations manual, practical flight assessment, and then you gain the operational authorization. The certificate, this GVC, valid for 5 years. The operational authorization needs to be renewed every year with the CAA.
Just get a couple more questions out of it just while we're on that then, Duncan. So in terms of applying to the CAA, is that done in the same process? Is that the same price as what it was for the PFCO?
Between the A2 CofC and the GVC, because the A2 CofC is a certificate that you get from us immediately after you finish the training, whereas the GVC, you get the certificate from us, but then you still have to apply to the CAA, and I think off the top of my head, I think it's £193. The VAT on that, and that's their application fee, and then you apply to them, and then you have to pay a fee every year to renew. And it's the same at the moment as to what it has always been. The CAA will regularly increase their prices just with inflation, but they've frozen it this year. It's still not cheap though.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. That's great stuff. So yeah, I think it's 118 at the moment, isn't it? And then the year before, I think it was 116. So yeah, like you say, Duncan, it just pops up a little bit every now and again. Awesome. Right, and then on to GVC, which is near the final step. Yeah, fire away, mate.
Sure. So the GVC is a bit more comprehensive than the A2 CofC, and it'd be great if we could run classroom courses for this. I mean, with the PFCO in the past, we've always tried to do as much as we can face-to-face. But nonetheless, we soldier on. We've got plenty of resources available online. So we've got like regular drop-in sessions. And virtual classrooms where you can it's effectively just kind of like this, almost like a webinar. It's a bit more interactive when, it'll be sort of an instructor with 25 individuals maximum, and you can raise your hand, ask a question, that sort of thing. But compared to the A2, this is a bit more in depth. It'll certainly take a couple of days to go through, and I suppose it doesn't have to be done in a couple of days. You can do it more so in a modular way, do a little bit every night. But with regards to the actual modules, opposed to just having 4, there are a couple more modules. So we've got air law and responsibilities. We've got UAS airspace operating principles, talking about airspace restrictions and how we go around it. Airmanship and aviation safety, human performance limitations, operating procedures, so kind of practically how we would go out and do a commercial job. MET, so the weather. Navigation and charts, UAS general knowledge, so it's talking about the technical side of things, and then operator responsibilities as well. And then that's then culminated with a theory exam at the end. The theory exam itself is done remotely at the moment. The operations manual review is done remotely, obviously, but then we will have to get you in for a practical flight assessment at some point. Now, we offer the practical flight assessment nationwide, multiple different locations, but at the moment we're not running any at this specific moment in time. But hopefully it's not too long until we can start running them again to make sure that everybody can get through the course. I think you're muted there, Jamie.
Thank you. Cheers, buddy. Yeah, so and as you can see from what Duncan's gone over, this is a lot more comprehensive course. For anyone who's on today who's done the PFCO, it's very, very similar. You're looking at more time in the practical, operations manual, more detail, but then in terms of the questions on that theory test, it has cut back from that 64 that you'll know. But yeah, in terms of the 2 courses, just to compare those, for anyone who's looking at the A2 CofC, this is one of the first steps that you need to get into the industry. So one of the major things that you've probably seen us emailing out about at the moment, we're doing that free of charge at the moment. So get on that, take full advantage of it. The test is £49, excluding VAT, but that's only to do the test at the end. If you're on the fence, if you're considering getting into this great and interesting industry, take full advantage of it. Get on and just take advantage and just do it for free. It's only when you get to the test, so you can do all that learning, see how great the Copters Academy is. And from there, you'll get a lot of information about, okay, well, maybe I could go into that different industry. I think there's a bit of an opportunity there. What training do I need to go from? So as one of your first steps, that A2 CofC course is a really nice introduction into the industry. In terms of this course, Duncan was saying, look, we'll be doing it over 3 days realistically when we do it back to face-to-face, which we obviously love. That's where our roots are. Online, we understand that people don't learn in that same way. So it may take 3 hours a day. Doing that for up to a month, it's completely down to you. We're in a very, very strange situation in the world at the moment, and the courses will relate to however you want to learn. So yeah, if you want to smash it out and jump in, that's absolutely fine. If you want to stretch it out over a few weeks, again, that's more than fine. And it's exactly the same for that A2 CofC. Another point on the A2 is it's a great place to start. The course, you're looking at about, how many hours would you say, Duncan, for the A2?
I suppose ultimately it depends on how much experience you have. So yeah, I'd say maybe 6 hours. But the thing is, if you've taken the PFCO with us in the past, then there will be modules such as the weather and aircraft general knowledge and stuff like that in airspace, where you'll probably already be familiar with it, and you might find yourself kind of clicking through. You still do need to do like an end of chapter quiz at the end and score that to be able to progress to the next module. But yeah, it mainly differs on how much experience you have. Just to chime in as to what you were saying before with regards to the the A2 CofC, it's definitely worth it. I suppose everyone on this webinar, it's a no-brainer to get yourself onto this course, the A2 CofC first, especially if it's free of charge to begin with. There is one drawback though. If you don't pay the £49 to begin with, you don't get access to the videos. You don't get access to the virtual classrooms as well, and there are a couple of other kind of interactive bits of content as well. So if you're set on doing it, the actual qualification, you may as well kind of, pay it up front. But if you're sitting on the fence, just have a look through the syllabus. But it's definitely worth upgrading, so to speak, and actually paying for the course, because then you get access to these virtual classrooms where it's a bit more live, a lot more interactive, and it will really enhance your learning throughout it.
In terms of the courses, yeah, so if you're going to contrast the two and look at them side by side, if you're on the fence and looking to get into the industry, a 6-hour course to something that's realistically on paper, it is 18 hours. If you are looking to go to an employer, an opportunity in the industry, yes, there are certain courses that you need to do to fly. And then you need to make sure they align with what drone you have and how you want to fly it, which is the most important thing. But if you can go out your way and say, look, I've done the GVC because I want to show that I'm completely aware of exactly how drones are supposed to be used, I'm an expert in my field, that's going to be the best way for you to proceed and take advantage of that. It's similar for our off-qual level 5 course. So yeah, again, it really shows off that those steps and those stages that have been put in place by copters and then also the CAA. So yeah, as Duncan mentioned, if you do pay up front, there are add-ons that are really going to help you. And in terms of our courses, the feedback we've got is absolutely spot on. So it is an interactive course. It's not just a slideshow. Where you just click through. I know when I was at university, I used to get 40 slides and get told to go learn it. It's not exciting. Whereas this, it's going to quiz you. It's got modules. It's got videos in it. There's active content for you to interact with. So yeah, it is an entertaining bit of information. In terms of our business starter packages, some of you may be wondering why we have the GVC in there. As Duncan said, to start with, a lot of the drones that you either may have already purchased or looking to get into, they do fall under that A2 CofC course. And it is off the back of my earlier point. If you have the GVC, you've been trained to a higher level. Again, we've written it in with our off-qual level 4. So this means you're being trained at a high standard. Level 4 is the same as the first year of university, so foundation degree. HNC, HND, that is level 4 standard, and that's the standard of our courses. We have to go through a process to make sure our courses are at that standard, and then it's the same for your level 5 for your next step up. So yeah, it's one of the reasons it's in there in the business starter packages. But then secondly, if and when we get you to the next stage where you're getting a bigger drone or a larger drone, the next platform up, let's say, for example, an M300, again, you're going to need that in terms of the training because of the weight of the drone and what class it's in. So yeah, there's lots of reasons around it. But look, if you are, as ever, if you do have any questions, if you use the tab or get in touch with us. And yeah, but I think that's everything from me in terms of actual information. Do you have anything else, Duncan, to pop in there?
Talking about the A2 CofC, mentioning that it was 6 hours. There is also like a practical element to it as well. So it's important to know that it's, whilst the training's online, you do need to kind of go out at some point and actually undertake some practical training. And regardless, though, throughout that, there's a workbook and we show you how to do that. And there are certain things to tick off. And then once that's done, you sign a declaration, send us, effectively that plus a copy of your flight logs, and then you then progress to the theory exam. But yeah, that's all from me. So
yeah,
far, there are loads of questions in the air.
I know. I've been trying to get through them as you've been talking. Yeah, we've got a lot of questions. Time on. So yeah, like I say, we'll try and get through as many as we can, and we'll go from there. Yeah, I suppose without further ado, are we gonna work? There we go. Yep. Right. Awesome. So in terms of the dates, the first question from Paul Wingfield is dates for the A2 CofC test, please. Yeah, we're just going through with our testing service, the provider for that. We're just getting that all signed off. On Monday, we should be all set to go. That's right, Duncan, is it next 72 hours following that?
Because we've had to obviously start invigilating the exams remotely, there are a few different kind of loopholes to jump through for compliance, mainly with the CAA. In the past, we've done it with members of staff, like I suppose members of staff in the office to kind of invigilate. but we've started using a third-party company where, provided it all goes well, we've got a test run, I think, at 4 o'clock with a member of staff, where we're going to do our final kind of test to make sure that everything is all above board. And then, provided it all goes well, from Monday, you'll be able to book a test. You'll be able to book a test effectively 24/7, slots dependent. So, if you want to do it at 7, 8 o'clock at night or super early in the morning, there will be someone there to invigilate the exam. But yeah, at the moment, we're hoping for Monday, provided it all goes well today.
Spot on, yeah, I'm sure it will. But yeah, to say that we're 2 weeks into the new year with these new regulations, we've already got a brand new course, which is free of charge for if you wanted to. It's almost all up and running. So yeah, really, really exciting stuff. Next question is from Jan. Just whether or not to stick with a PFCO for the next 1 to 2 years. Jan, I'll start with that one. It really depends on how you want to operate with your drone and how you want to do it. What I would say in terms of the GVC, there is going to be a transferal course which is on the horizon. Unless you're getting stuck by the new regulations, there's no real need for you to push over. You can if you want. It's down to you. As Duncan was saying, there are going to be different courses that we can add on. So things like extended visual line of sight, beyond visual line of sight courses and modules that you're going to be able to add to your application, to the way you're using drones at the moment. But in terms of your next steps, that first one would be the A2 CofC. In terms of timeline for the PFCO, Duncan, am I right in saying it's until the end of 2023 that the PFCO is going to be valid for?
Yeah, so you can continue to renew it up until the 31st of December 2023, and then after that point, the qualification you have isn't accepted anymore. You need to then undertake the GVC going forward.
Yeah, spot on. Okay, awesome. So Sujan has asked, what will happen after the transition period ends for all SUA and CE Max? Do we need to fly far away every time from people and buildings? In terms of the CE Max, like you say, we're waiting for more information to come out on this in terms of regulations and restrictions, what they are, but that's a long way in the future at the moment. In terms of drones, if you get something now, don't worry, it's not going to hold you back at all. So yeah, there's a lot of people when they are looking at drones at the moment, they are asking about this, which is really good because it shows you are paying attention to the changes that are going on out there. But don't let that be a decision to hold you back moving forward. No drones are CE Max are rated at the moment, so it shouldn't be something to stop you moving forward and earning money in this industry. Duncan, anything to add on that as well?
Will eventually become legacy aircraft. If it's below 250 grams, you can still make use of the overflight of people. But if it's between 250 grams and 25 kilograms, so the majority of aircraft, that puts you into the A3 subcategory. So, that would be your limitation, just operating in that A3 subcategory, unless you were to purchase a CE rated drone. But again, we're talking about things that are, 2 years down the line from here. And regulation changes quite a lot of the time anyway.
That's it. It is a very new industry, so it is constantly changing, guys. So yeah, you do right. Keep your finger on the pulse, and we'll be putting out loads of blog posts about this as well. A couple of questions about, is it recorded? Yeah, this is all recorded, guys. So if you do have to leave, don't worry. Yeah, this is going to be recorded and sent out. And a couple of guys were wondering if they can put it in the social media pages. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Probably best off waiting until we send out the link when it's all rendered on YouTube, and then post away. That's absolutely fine. Look, it is new. It is confusing in the industry, but if we all help each other out and we're on the same page, then we'll all get through this. Okay, next question is a good one. We've got a few comments on this one as well. Any guidance material, Duncan, on the update in PFCO operations manual to fall in with the new regulations from the 1st of Jan?
An operations manual template. Kind of ironically, we've just signed off version 3.5 today, this morning. About midday today, just before we start this webinar. Which is always available to past PFCO students and individuals that have undertaken the GVC training with us. So if you have trained with us, just, I suppose, send us an email, give us a call, and we'll forward you out that template. And in the template, it has a change log, and that will tell you all of the different changes we've added to it. So, for example, if you use version 3.2, you just need to go from 3.2 to 3.5 and see all the additions that we've put and just update your manual accordingly.
Awesome. Good stuff. Right. Next question is Charles Loddy. Charles, I think we may have covered a lot of things in this webinar so far. So if you don't mind, and if you're still on the webinar, could you go into the comment section of your question and just let us know if you've got any more specific questions, because we've obviously gone over a lot. This was one of the first questions in. So next one, what credentials would I need for roof surveys in residential areas, non-commercial? Right, okay, so Joanne, it's really down to you in terms of what drone you have, how you want to fly it, and what those areas are like. So going through the courses, whether it's the A2 CofC or GVC, after you've done your flying and Mavic 2, okay, awesome. So once you go through the steps, so flyer ID, operator ID, next step, you've got your A2 CofC. We will show you how to go through those processes, how to set up properly, but it's all about safety. It's all about risk. So this is what we need to keep in mind every time we fly. These drones are dangerous at the end of the day, so we just need to make sure everything's set up safely, and moving on from there. But looking at what you've mentioned there, Jan, I'd say A2 CofC will be absolutely fine. In terms of who you're working with or for, I know you've put it on commercially, but you might want to look at the GVC as well in terms of the next step, depending on if you are working with a larger company, for example. Okay, so Mark's asked about how to combine the ops manual for the PFCO and A2 CofC, and I got asked this question the other day, but Duncan, do you want to just open that one up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you currently have a PFCO and your renewal date isn't for a while, I wouldn't worry too much about updating the operations manual immediately. But with our template, there is an element to add in information about operating the open category. So strictly speaking, the operations manual that you write is for operating in a specific category under a specific predetermined risk assessment, which is that you effectively get the permissions for 50 meters from people, 30 meters for takeoff and landing, that sort of thing. But for a lot of people, they want to use the open category benefits too, kind of thinking of it almost as if like having an additional ticket, not an exemption, but having an additional way to fly closer to people with the smaller aircraft. Within our latest operations manual template, it effectively helps you to, it allows you to implement open category operations and clearly defines them. There are a couple of differences to be aware of, and it's mainly supporting the reporting requirements. So if you crash the aircraft or have some form of incident, the reporting method you need to use is different whether you're operating under your operational authorization or operating with your A2 CofC in the open category. But all that information is covered in our ops manual template, so just refer to that.
Spot on, awesome. And Kevin's just got my attention there on the right hand side in the chat. Yeah, so in terms of the A2 CofC course, Kevin, if you've gone through the website, as you can imagine, we've had a lot of people going through this process at the moment. So every Friday, we can set realistic expectations to get the course out and running to people. We've had a lot of people wanting to go through this course. There's obviously a lot of confusion. We're trying to help as many people as possible. When you're doing the course, you'll be able to do it absolutely anytime you want. As Duncan said, if you've got kids, you can do it on a night. If you're a morning person, you can do it in the morning, on your lunch break, etc., etc. It would just be a case of getting you processed and getting you through the doors, and then off you go. And then after Monday, we can get you booked onto the course, the actual test at the end. So yeah, just bear with us and maybe drop us a message at info@copsers.com, and we can get that chased up for you. But yeah, sorry if you've been waiting a little bit there. Yeah, far away.
About rushing through the course. A lot of people, we've had a lot of interest from people that have PFCOs, a lot of people that have years of experience, and the actual contents it's not massive. And for a lot of people that have done our PFCO or CofSU training course, the majority of content's a bit of a walk in the park for them, and that's the theoretical exam will be. But you still need to do that self-monitored practical flight training, and you still need to drop in on one of our virtual classrooms as well. So there are loads of resources available before you get to the point as to when you'd be ready to sit the test. So I suppose don't worry too much about getting that certificate. Once you've passed the test, it's something which we issue. It's not like the CAA when they have their service level agreement is 28 working days, I believe, to get the permission back to you. Whereas getting a certificate from us will realistically be a couple of working days as to when you complete the exam. We review it and then we issue you the certificate there and then you can operate that minute that you have the certificate. So, we're trying to get people enrolled as quickly as we can, but it's been a huge manual task with the crazy volume of people that have purchased the course or signed up for the course. But yeah, it's good news for us anyway. I suppose it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So the next question is from Richard. In terms of flying close to buildings for real estate purposes with the Mavic 2 Pro, what's required under the A2 CofC? So Richard, hopefully you've got your flyer ID, operator's ID, the actual A2 CofC course, as Duncan went through earlier. You've got your theory, and then you've got that examination that you'll then have, and then self-certifying flight assessment. So ideally, if you get some hours in beforehand, sign up, then an extra couple of hours whilst you're on the course to show that you're competent in all these different areas, flying the drone safely in those processes, and then off you go. When you are doing those flights, any risk assessment is good. It's good practice to have. So we always recommend just do it. Again, it's coming back to that risk. It's coming back to that safety side, letting people know if you're going to be in the area. In terms of real estate, a lot of it is you're going to be in and around people that could be in the area. It's always a potential with real estate. So if you do knock on a few houses and let them know you're going to be in the area, it's a good thing to do. And even so, that can open up other opportunities. So look, I'm going to be in the area with my Mavic in the next couple of days. I've got some real estate work that I'm going to be doing on number 5 around the corner. By all means, come and have a look if you wanted to watch and look, there's some drones coming on. So yeah, you can open it up like that. But yeah, it's just going through those right processes and ticking the right boxes. In terms of questions, guys, there's a lot to say the least. So we'll keep going, if we say until about 15:15, see how we go, how many we can get through. And again, if we haven't answered it already, we'll try and get in touch with as many as we can. And I hope this has been really helpful for you guys so far. Next question is, okay, so Mark, this is probably the most popular question out there. So what are the rules behind being commercial for the A2 CofC? If I want to earn money with my drone, what do I need to now do? There's no distinction now. As we touched on earlier, there's absolutely no distinction. So for example, let's say you go down to Argos and get yourself a new drone. What do I have to do to fly it? You have to tick the right boxes now. It's not about being commercial. It's about that risk. It's about the weight category and how you want to fly the drone. So ticking those boxes. So in terms of the A2 CofC, as I mentioned earlier, for the early questions, go through that process, tick the boxes. It's always good to do a risk assessment anyway. If you're wanting more training, the A2 CofC is only little. You can do that, as Duncan said, in a couple of days. So if you wanted more training to give yourself more confidence, maybe the GVC is a good option moving forward. When we did the courses face-to-face, it feels like a while ago now, we could see on the course who was confident and who was a bit nervous for the flight assessments. If you are looking to do work in future, give yourself that confidence, do extra training, do extra practice. So we say for our GVC course, a minimum of 5 to 10 hours, that sort of ballpark, but go do 20, go do 30 hours. If you can get the opportunity to go fly, go do it, because you're going to feel so much more confident when you're out in the industry. So the new flight assessment, there's going to be some case study flying in there as well. And this is a really nice opportunity for you to kind of take the flight test as a bit of a trial. look, you can operate that day as if you're performing a job, as if you're doing a commercial flight, for example. So a lot of people are nervous for that next step of, look, I've now got my course, I've ticked all the boxes I need to do, I've got a really professional and great drone, I need to just go out and get money now. So this is a really nice step for you to give you that confidence moving forward. So yeah, by all means, get in touch if you are a bit nervous in that situation, you want that confidence, but the GVC is a good one for it. And with both courses, we do give you lots of maneuvers to practice, different things that you should be competent at moving forward. And again, this drone isn't the one, this industry isn't one for backflips, kamikaze circuits or anything crazy. This is all about doing it nice and safely, and just doing it slowly. This is all about data capture for this industry. So just do it nice and softly. And just on that, Duncan, actually, a question that comes to mind for me in terms of FPV drones, whereabouts do they sit in this?
There's a good point. A lot of people want to fly their aircraft with goggles, and it's something which is really common in the industry. It can be useful. It can, there are pros and cons to using them. But for those that are using goggles, in order to maintain that visual line of sight, I suppose for yourself, you're not able to. At that point when you've got the goggles on, you're not able to see the surrounding airspace. You're not able to physically see the aircraft. All you're looking at is what the aircraft is seeing through its camera. So if you do wish to do that, then you need to have an observer with you, standing right next to you, and they need to be the one that is scanning the airspace, for yourself. And that's something which you need to be doing in that, I suppose in that, specific category, undertaking the GVC course. And yeah, it's effectively just a case of having a visual observer next to you. If you did want to do that, you'd write it into your operations manual. You'd make sure that the CAA have seen it, and that everybody involved is, understands what the process is for doing that. But it's not something which you need to apply for kind of specific permission for. You just need to make sure that you've got the procedures written into that manual.
Spot on, good stuff. Right, and then let's see how many we can have a bit of a quick fire through. So Lauren has asked, I'm partway through doing my PFCO paperwork, etc. Can I transfer to the GVC? If you are partway through, then it's very likely that we've already transferred you over. Depending on what stage you're at, a lot of the time you will just be transferred straight over to that A2 CofC and GVC, they're combined. What I would say is, if you're not sure, or if anything on the Copters Academy isn't there that you think that should be, by all means get in touch with our customer service team and they'll be able to help you with that one. Yeah, it's always best to get in touch and just check. As you can imagine, with the regulations and the changes, we have had a lot of, we've been busy to say the least in the office, or guys working from home. So just be patient as you can. Yeah, but essentially, if you're halfway through the modules, or a lot of the time we would have just transferred you over to the GVC. So yeah, I won't worry about, no one's going to lose out on anything is the main thing to take from that. If you've already passed the PFCO flight test and training, can you use the self-taught flight assessment for the CofC? Yes, so as we've mentioned there, it's self-assessed anyway. Go through the process. There's no harm in doing it. That test and the A2 CofC course isn't a long one. As Duncan was saying there, there's no rush. Let's do it properly. Again, it comes back to that risk side. Are you doing everything properly? Are you ticking the right boxes? There might be something that you've missed. I know it's taken quite a bit of time for Copters to digest it. Back in 2019, when all these new regulations come out around summertime, it was confusing. It took us a bit, and we had to go through the courses ourselves just to understand what it means. So I really would say just jump in the courses, get through the A2 CofC minimal, and just go from there. How are we doing? Right, see if we can get through a few more, Duncan, and then I think we'll call it a day.
Yeah, sounds good.
Right, so Steve's asked, are the regulations applicable to the point of takeoff or the location of the controller?
I think is it Steve you said?
Yes, Steve.
I think Steve is probably talking about the separation distances, and that refers to the distance from the aircraft in the air. You know, in terms of the actual distances away from the aircraft, it's from the remote pilot. So it's you know, me stood there with the remote controller. I can fly 500 meters away as long as I can still see the aircraft. I can fly up to 400 feet from the surface, so you know, from the ground or from the water in an open area. And then those separation distances from uninvolved people is talking about the distance from the aircraft to that individual.
Spot on. That's awesome. Cheers, Duncan. And then, so I have a PFCO and an A2 CofC. What does the GVC give me over these? So a really standout one are going to be these bolt-on points. You've got your different distances. So you've got the PFCO, which we spoke about, is the bubble. We've got the 1x1 rule for the new regulations. And then we have the different distances from the uninvolved people. But again, it really depends on how you wish to operate. So by all means, by flicking through these slides over again, you can see what is going to be best for you. I would use this webinar as a tool, guys, moving forward. But yeah, essentially it is all down to how you operate and what drone you have, Matt. Right, should we say, let's see if we can get a good one with a few comments on. Okay, so Aggie, just a quick one there is, does Copters provide help with the ops manual renew? Yep, so absolutely. Any transferal, absolutely fine. We're here to help, essentially. So any questions that you guys have with this industry, that's absolutely fine. Last one then, Duncan. 25 kilograms is allowed to overfly people, question mark, at 50 meters from the specific.
I'm not too sure what.
Yeah. So yeah, essentially that way, essentially 25 kilograms, no, you wouldn't be able to do that overflight. And in terms of moving forward in the industry, there's not going to be a lot of overflight that is allowed. So it's only the really, really light stuff that can do it. I thought I'd just pull a random one out there for us, Duncan. But yeah, I think we'll call it a day. There's a lot of questions left over, so we will try and get in touch as much as we can. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. It's been awesome. It's great to see so many of you sticking around as well. That's really good. I hope it's helped. If you do have any questions, do let us know. But yeah, Duncan, how do you feel?
Yeah, great. It's great to have so many people on. I'm assuming there are probably quite a few people that have signed up to our A2 CofC course and that are going through the content. So our virtual classrooms are going to be available from, you know, realistically from Monday, as well as the booking system. So there'll be drop-in sessions where there's no specific topic. There will be, you know, specific modules. So modules 1 and 2 will be doing effectively just a slideshow on live, and then 3 and 4 as well. And same goes for the GVC course. There'll be like an operations manual workshop live, where you can have a one-to-one interaction with one of us, and it's effectively just ourselves sat here going through either the syllabus or helping you through with your operations manual. So, you know, if you are signed up for these courses, make sure you take advantage of these additional resources.
Absolutely. Yeah, spot on. So yeah, thanks for all for joining us. Duncan, you've been an absolute star. Well done, mate. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Stay safe out there. And yeah, enjoy flying. And thanks, everyone. See you later.
Cheers.